Welcome to Ask the Tech Coach, brought to you by the TeacherCast Educational Network. If you are in charge of professional development and looking to build an innovative digital learning experience, this is the podcast for you. Join us each week as we uncover strategies that tech coaches are using to drive their digital transformations one classroom at a time. And now for your host, with over 2 decades of experience working with tech coaches and ed tech companies from all around the world, Jeff Bradbury.
Hello and welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury. Thank you so much for joining us today and making TeacherCast your home for professional development. This is Ask the Tech Coach podcast, episode number 264. If you guys haven't had a chance to check out all the great stuff over at askthetechcoach.com, head on over there today and check out all of our great blogs, our podcasts, our instructional videos, and so much more. For all of your instructional coaching needs, check out askthetechcoach.com. On today's episode, I have an educator and a coach, a virtual coach at that. We'll get into that in a little bit. Talking all about artificial intelligence and how he's helping to support not just using it in the school district, but how he's leading the transformation in his community to support this new and emerging technology. I want to bring on today Mr. Matt Sherrill. Matt, how are you today? Welcome to TeacherCast.
I'm fantastic. Happy to be here, Jeff. Thank you.
I am so happy and thankful that you're here. You are, of course, a classroom teacher, ELA teacher, but you've also got some coaching things that you're doing. Tell us what's going on with you these days.
Yeah, so I've been in the classroom for about 15 years, the last 13 of which have been ELA 8th grade. And then about a year ago, I heard about an opportunity through our state level union where I could be a virtual instructional coach for early career teachers from around the state. So the idea had been proposed to the state of Illinois a while back, but because of funding, they couldn't quite get it off the ground. Then COVID hit, and they realized we have a lot of early career teachers that are coming into a whole new level of teaching here. So they kind of greenlit the program, and it's been a blast to be a part of. I work with a handful of teachers in their 1st through 3rd years from around the state, and we meet about once a week virtually and just try to support them the way an instructional coach would in a district where they might not have instructional coaches available.
So when you're working with new teachers, what are you working on? Is it curricular stuff? Is it how to do Google stuff? Is it, what are some of the conversations like?
So I try to let them lead it as much as possible, kind of establish what their needs are early on. Being a tech-minded person and being so involved in the AI landscape in education lately, a lot of them want to gravitate towards that, especially with those tools that maybe can help with content creation, especially because, as we all know, those early years of teaching, a lot of your time is just spent making the activities, the documents, all of that. So that's been a big focus this year. But there are other things that come up. We might have one week and there was a really tough parent email that came through. And so maybe we talk through that. And, you know, anything from evaluation time to planning the next unit to looking at some tech tools that could help support what they're doing in the classroom.
And is this usually a one-to-one conversation, or do you have a chance to work with groups of new teachers? How is everything set up for you?
So it's usually one-to-one. You can coordinate to have the teachers on one call. Schedule-wise, that hasn't worked out as much this year with the 3 teachers I'm involved with. So it's mostly one-to-one, but there's always that option if schedules can line up to meet all together.
Now, you mentioned, and this is all fascinating, you mentioned that this is all after hours, after school. Is this through your primary district? Is this, a secondary gig for you? Like, how did you get all involved in all this?
So it's a secondary gig. It's through, like I said, through our state level union. And so I had to apply for it and interviewed, and they try to match you up with other content area teachers and specific grade levels as well. So all three of the teachers I work with are 8th grade ELA. My wife does it as well. She's a special education teacher, and so she does it as well. And trying to coordinate schedules around that can get tricky, but it's something that we both love to do. We both love supporting teachers, especially new teachers, and kind of coaching them through that stuff. And so I do get paid for it, which is, the big draw of it. But I originally heard about it from a friend of mine who was really involved. She actually works for our state level union now, and she was the one that kind of put it on my radar. And when I looked into it, I thought this would be a great opportunity.
I love this concept here. And you are in Illinois, you said, and are you aware of these programs in other states, or I've never heard of something like this where you're doing after hours mentoring with teachers in other districts? Is that a nationwide program? Have you heard?
Not that I know of. Like I said, I know the state level union tried getting it off the ground earlier, but then it wasn't until they needed the funding for it, right? And so when COVID hit, then the Illinois State Board of Education said, okay, we see this as a need. We will help fund this. And so it's mostly grant supported. So I don't know of any other states that have this type of program, but it's been working out really well for us.
That is amazing. And if anybody's looking for more information, check out our archives over at askthetechcoach.com. Again, this is episode 264. We're going to make sure that we have all of the links to Matt's social feeds and emails and stuff like that. This is a fantastic program. Now, Matt, over the last few weeks, we've been having a lot of podcasts on artificial intelligence, and we've I'm still not sure what this one is. We've looked at artificial intelligence from a number of different lenses, from coaching to teaching to administrating to being an AI entrepreneur. But I'm excited about this because you've actually been able to create and form an AI advisory team in your area. Tell us a little bit about how this came together, who might be on an AI advisory team, and how did it start? What's the position? What is an AI advisory team?
Yeah, so it kind of happened organically. I had taken a class over the summer through the teaching channel on AI in education. And I had the reaction that a lot of teachers have when they first kind of experience AI in the education realm. It ranges from excitement and look at how cool this is and how much time it can save me to, oh my goodness, we need to start teaching some AI literacy to staff and students because this thing could spin out of control real fast. So I had approached our director of secondary education in our district, and I already had a good established relationship with him because I'm a building chair for our ELA department. So I meet with him frequently. And I mentioned this to him. I said, what are we doing about all of this? Because I tend to operate, it's kind of a version of the Dunning-Kruger effect where, I learn something new and I just assume I'm late to the party and everybody else has already known about this. And so I just assume that they have a better handle on it. So when I brought it up, he had mentioned, we're hearing more about it and it's been coming up a lot in different groups that I'm a part of, but we haven't really tackled this yet. And I was like, well, I think the sooner the better, because if we don't start doing something now, we're going to be playing catch up for the next decade. And so he got on board real quick. He was willing to send me to different conferences. We had a digital literacy conference in our state that he sent me to where it was a lot on AI literacy. So I attended those sessions, took tons of notes, brought them back to the district and kind of talked to the director and said, hey, here's what I heard about, here's what I'm thinking. And so it started as, let's start peppering this into some of our institute days where we can maybe start putting this on teachers' radar so they know it's out there, they can start paying attention to it. And so then eventually it started catching on, and they saw that as teachers were attending these sessions, they were leaving there with new information and an excitement and also some nervousness. So we decided to have this team that kind of started as just me and our 2 technology coaches at the secondary level in our district. And then as the year went on, we added our media specialists, so like our IMC specialists. We've added some computer science teachers. And so we've just been collaborating throughout the year, creating professional development, coming up with some guidelines. We helped craft our district's position statement on the use of AI. And so we've just been kind of laying the groundwork and trying to get people involved in at least paying attention to it, because that was what we found. We either had a group of teachers that they were like, that's tech stuff, I'm not paying attention to that, that's not really relevant to me, not realizing your students are already using this, right? And so then you had some other teachers that were only concerned about cheating. And then you had some other teachers that had been paying attention to it. So our work has really been trying to get everybody on board and coming up with a common language and coming up with some general overviews that the teachers who weren't paying attention realized, I can't keep my head in the sand on this. And then those who were starting to use it realized, okay, I can't be gung-ho using it just yet until we get some things established in the district. So it was kind of a balancing act over the course of the year.
So there's a lot to unpack in there. Let's break this down little bit by little bit here. I would imagine, and correct me here, but I would imagine that when you first get a group of people together to talk about AI, it's something like being on a jury. You have to take a quick temperature check to go, are we for it? Are we against it? Do we not know? And then you start exploring the details. Am I close? Is there, how was that first? Let's take this little bit by little bit here, but what was that first get together like?
So the first get together with the team or with the teachers in general?
Let's start with the advisory team.
Okay, so we first wanted to just explore some immediate tools that teachers could use on their end that would help support what they were doing in preparation for the classroom. So DIFIT was one of those first tools where, especially our social studies and science teachers that use a lot of articles and nonfiction text, that maybe they find the perfect article, but they aren't quite sure how to differentiate it for all the various reading levels in their classrooms. We introduce something like DIFIT, show them how it can rewrite any text at an appropriate grade level and gives you a little bit more control in a fraction of the time as opposed to rewriting it all by yourself. So that was a big light bulb moment for a lot of teachers because that touched on a lot of content areas. And so we as a team said, let's start with something like that. Let's show them, the capability of these teacher-facing tools and how it can make your life a little bit easier right now. And then as we started getting teachers on board with that, the team started talking around, okay, well, we can't just talk about the wonderful qualities of this. We have to demystify it, right? That's the first step that a lot of different organizations say, is when you're trying to give this AI literacy professional development, demystify it first. And so we would show them the tool, but then talk about, now here are the things to be aware of and how you still need to be the human in the loop, in the driver's seat, the one verifying everything and making sure that it's what it needs to be. So that was a big focus of that advisory team in the beginning, is how do we kind of find that balancing act of getting them excited and interested, but still having them be mindful about their use of it. And so that was our big starting point.
In talking to many school districts, some have jumped right in. Some have had to create full-blown policies about this. At what point in your meetings did you make that first contact with your uppers, central office, superintendent? But really my question is, at what point did you decide that you need to get the lawyer involved? Was there a legal ramification to any of these meetings and decisions?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say After our first initial institute where we introduced those teacher-facing tools that could help with differentiating text and all of that, and we saw there was an interest, then from the director's level, he said, okay, teachers are into this. Let's keep rolling with this. And that's when we sat down and said, okay, well, we need to come up with some sort of crash course overview of what this is, but we want to make sure it's also in line with district policy, district expectations, all of that. So it was pretty early on when we realized this is something that this team was going to go beyond just presenting tools on institute days. So we were starting to flesh out the guidelines and the vision for this in the district. And so at that point was when, we talked as a group. Our director did a great job being sort of that liaison between the team and those other district administrators and the attorney for our district. And so the frustrating part with that is not everybody moves at the same pace, right? So you have the team rearing ready to go, and then you had some other people where they're like, well, we need to make sure we check on this, and we need to refine this language, and we need to double check that. And so it could be difficult in the beginning when we were ready for the next steps, but we were also waiting for the other stakeholders to chime in on it.
Now, what recommendations do you have for other school districts, other coaches who might be asked to be or to be creating these types of advisory teams? Is this tread lightly? Is this jump in with 2 feet? Is this let legal take over? And I'm sorry, I'm bringing that up constantly, but I've had a lot of shows over the last little bit where that's been the theme of, we want to do this, but they're in charge because it is what it is. What advice do you have for other school districts?
So I would say build your resource pool to build up your knowledge on what other districts and other states are doing. Where our group started picking up steam was as states started releasing guidelines, right? You had North Carolina recently. You just had, I think Arizona just released theirs yesterday. And so kind of paying attention to some of the work that might be going on in your state already as the starting point, because in Illinois, we didn't have any state guidance. And we still don't right now. So it really is on the districts to do this. So I would recommend anybody who's wanting to get something like this started, or if they've been tasked with getting something like this started, tread lightly in the sense of ensure that you have an understanding of what all levels are expecting of AI in education, whether it's in your state, your district, individual buildings, whatever the case may be, and get a lay of the land there and see where that lines up with the vision the team might have. Because we did have some disagreements at times, and we had to navigate those. So making sure you're building up that resource pool of, well, here's how different districts in different states are doing it, gives you a lot more, I don't want to say ammunition, but it does give you a lot more ground to stand on if you're trying to present a vision that aligns with maybe what's going on in other places, and showing that, this isn't just us coming up with this.
I think when it comes to AI, there are those who are jumping in fully, and then there are those who need to be, here's a cookie. But then for many people, AI is just ChatGPT or Copilot or those kinds of clones. But obviously we know now there's a wide variety of things that fall under that. Talk to us a little bit about some of the ways that you as a coach or you as a lead teacher out there have kind of brought teachers to the table. I'll ask this a different way. In a few days, I'm going to be doing my first professional development with the science department. I want to start with an AI, and I hate saying it this way, trick, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of those little icebreakers that we can do as coaches to kind of get people started, get their feet wet? And by the way, for those out there who are listening, everything that we talk about. We're going to start to throw the links into our show notes. Again, this is episode number 264. So Matt, what do you have for these little, AI icebreakers that don't involve, are they cheating on things, right? Like what are those first little, toe in the waters?
So in terms of icebreakers, some of the things we've done is using a platform like Udio or Suno, which is the text to music generator, and just creating a theme song that as teachers are walking into the room, that's playing. We had one of the sessions in our district was what they called the AI sandbox. And it was just time for teachers to come in, explore some tools with the coaches there and with some knowledgeable people there to help guide them through the process. And so just having something like that, like a song based on what it is you're going to be talking about, and then sharing with people, hey, this song you're hearing right now, this was 100% AI generated. Because then that might start turning the wheels more creatively for teachers, especially those who only think of it as students are using it to cheat. It's, I can come up with some engaging elements for lessons, or, AI image generation. If you've seen, it's been a trend, the Care AIoki, where you take the song lyrics of a song and you plug it into an image generator, and the only prompt is the lyrics of the songs. And so then you show that image and have teachers guess, based on this image, what song do you think this was based on? Like what lyrics created this? So you have those little things that kind of let people see it's more than just ChatGPT. But then beyond that, the next steps would just be those approachable tools. So things that are a little bit more narrowly focused are helpful for hesitant teachers, like something like Diffit that started off as just changing the reading level of a text, versus some other ones that maybe have like something like Magic School, where there's a whole lot you could explore with that tool. So kind of reading your audience is a big step in that. Are these teachers looking for tools that can help them now? Are you wanting not to overwhelm them? So finding those teacher-facing tools is very, very helpful. I like Magic School a lot. I got on board with that right away. I became one of their Magic School pioneers as soon as I could, and just kind of showing people, here's this one little tool. Even if you don't use anything else on this platform, here's this one tool that might help you out. And that kind of gives the teachers, especially those hesitant teachers, a way to dip their toe in and not feel overwhelmed by all of this AI stuff.
And what has been your experience in bringing that into school districts? I've heard stories where you go up there, you do your icebreaker, and it's like, hey, what are we doing? And some of it's give me more, and some of it, there's all the different ways that some people can receive this. I've heard of stories of coaches where it immediately goes into, that AI stuff, they're cheating. What's been your experience? Are teachers mostly energetic about this? Are they accepting of this? Are they curious about this? What are you seeing out there? What are you hearing out there?
So initially, we were hearing a lot more, I would say at the high school level, especially a lot more concerns around the cheating, right? Because they were seeing that run rampant. At the junior high level, there was a little bit more open-mindedness to it. But where I would say the turning point was in our district was it's not the ideal way of doing things with the kind of top-down communication, but we did one session, it was about an hour, of the overview of, okay, you've been hearing this term AI. What does this mean? What is it? Why do we need to pay attention to it? And we showed them the good, the bad, and the ugly. We showed them, here's how AI can really revolutionize education and create personalized learning for our students and support them in a lot of different ways. But there's also a lot of scary things that if we're not paying attention to it, this stuff can get out of control. So we didn't just focus on school. We focused, in your personal lives. We have an election coming up. And if you think we were swimming in misinformation the last election cycle, we're going to be drowning in it now with the speed that articles can be pushed out to multiple sources and AI generated images. And you're hearing more and more of like the voice cloning stories and the deep fakes out there. And so kind of putting it on teachers' radar of this is why you can't ignore it. Even if you don't plan on using it in your classroom, you have to be aware of what this stuff is capable of. Because if you're not an AI cheerleader, at the very least, you can see the importance of why you yourself need to be AI literate and why we need to be teaching our students how to be AI literate. And that was the big turning point. I had several teachers come up to me after that presentation. We did one at the high school and we did one at the junior high level. And a lot of the feedback was, I got really interested and excited, but you also terrified me. And now I need to pay attention to this. And we're like, well, that's kind of the point. Like, shock you into paying attention and realizing this isn't going away. As educators, we kind of have a responsibility to educate ourselves on this stuff that is going to impact our students for the rest of their lives as they move into an ever increasing AI influenced world. So that was the big piece for us. That's when we started seeing people not just focus on the cheating. They still understood that's an issue and we need to address that. And we have things planned for next year to talk around how do we rethink assessment in the age of AI, but to get them to shift their focus, at least momentarily, away from this cheating cloud and more on, okay, this isn't going away. I need to pay attention to this stuff. And that's when we started getting more teachers on board. We had teachers, volunteer to lead PD sessions on specific tools and wanting to get more involved. In fact, one of the people on our advisory team, one of the media specialists, she had admitted to the group, she's like, I was very hesitant with this AI stuff. And when they asked me to be on this team, I didn't think it was for me. But being on it, I realized why I had to be on this team, because I'm realizing the importance of this. I realize the impact of this on our staff and students. And so we started getting more teachers wanting to share those types of stories as well.
You mentioned all those different tools. And over the last couple of months, I've had a chance to look at this topic, not just as a podcaster, but I've looked at it from a teacher's point of view. I've looked at it from a coach's point of view, and I've always have my administrator hat on. And the one thing about AI is that, yes, it has helped in the classroom. And I'm just going to bring up, Magic AI. I probably use that 3 or 4 times a month in just making rubrics. Honestly, I haven't really gotten into all the little details of the platform yet. But just being able to create a rubric that I can then, I make my little spreadsheet for, I stick it onto Google Classroom and it's there. And for nothing else, it's giving me something in Google Classroom to click off of. So, this is 5 points, this is 4 points. So if nothing else, at least when a student says, why did I get this grade? The rubric is right there for me. And I didn't have to really generate that. And I have fought with Magic AI a couple times where, this isn't good, this is good. Keep these 2 columns. I mean, I've messed around with it enough. And now that I have those rubrics, they're good for next year. They're good for other teachers. I want to go back to one thing, because I had this conversation the other day with the tech director. At what point do you need to worry about the policy of AI? And at what point can you just openly try things? I'll give you an example. Recently, we had an ISTE community leaders meeting for instructional coaches. And it was one of those, bring a tool, let's talk about it. Somebody had brought in the fact that now with Google Arts and Culture, they've got one of those AI things where it gives you a picture and then it says, describe the picture. It'll try to make the same picture. I think it's called Say What You See or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Beautiful. So I go into school and I try this out. I was, in a random classroom with a bunch of students, and we walked up to a picture on the wall, and I just said to them, describe that picture. And I did that 2 or 3 different times with like, pictures on the wall, hanging up posters and stuff. Then we went to the computer. Then we opened up arts and culture. And then, they only give you 120, 180 characters or whatever it is. And the kids had so much fun trying to figure out how to make the thing draw a horse or a ramen noodles or whatever it happens to be. I don't think I need to have a policy for that. Correct? Am I right? There's no need to have a policy for that. I want to try to use Magic School AI's student features. Do I need a policy for that? I want to, the other day we were learning how to write vision statements for our school. And we brought out Copilot and Gemini and ChatGPT and Magic AI. And we were practicing writing the same exact prompts. And I was just using my own account under my personal, and I asked permission to do all that stuff. But I mean, it was basically, let's try all the different major brands, but using the same exact words just to see which ones we like. In your opinion, do I need a policy for that? Or does the policy only come when I turn AI over to the students?
So in my personal opinion, and the way we operate it in terms of policy language. So here's how I'll start off with this. When you use the word policy, typically that's like the formal board policy. There's a big process that is involved with that. And so what we decided on our team early on, which is the guidance you hear from a lot of the organizations like AI for Education and all of them, is start with the least restrictive language for your board policy. And oftentimes you can usually just use your existing policy and just like your acceptable use policies and incorporate AI and other emerging technologies. And that's what we did in our district. From there, then we started crafting the student handbook language. Okay, what's going to happen if these policies are violated? And that, again, goes through another formal process where you start to narrow down and become a little bit more specific and restrictive in the language are the guidelines. Because guidelines, we can update those quickly. We don't have to go through a board approval process. And so our guidelines are more focused on the ethical and responsible use of AI. And so from that standpoint, we had taken the approach that being in Illinois, we have SOPA, which is our state level version of COPA. And anything that students have to sign into, our district has to have a signed agreement with that platform. And so that kind of shaped a little bit of our guidance, right? If you're going to be turning it over to students, you need to make sure that if they're signing into it, we have an agreement with them. When it comes to the examples you gave, right? You're putting it up on your board and you're doing this together. We don't have any guidelines restricting that other than being mindful as the teacher, like you still need to be in the driver's seat. You need to kind of vet these tools. You need to be careful with, the outputs that are being produced, checking for bias, accuracy, all of those things. But if it's a tool like Say What You See, that's a great example where if we're doing that as a class, we don't need a policy in place for that. We're able to do that as much as we want. Like you said, where that stuff starts coming into play is when are we putting this in the hands of students? Because something like Magic Student, they don't have to log in technically. You share the room and they can use whatever pseudonym they want. Mm-hmm. But that's where things got a little sticky in our district, because at first the AI advisory team is, well, that's SOPA compliant, right? They're not signing into it. The teacher can still see the conversations. We can see how the students have interacted with it and the outputs they're getting. But the district was like, yeah, but until we have like guidelines in place where we are teaching students the responsible use of this, and we have a district-wide policy and guideline document, that's when we can start putting it in the hands of students. So that's where, there was a little disagreement at first in terms of, well, legally we're compliant versus the district saying, yeah, but to cover our bases, we also want to have these guidelines in place.
Let's take a quick left turn here, Matt, because I want to talk about using AI as an organizational tool, as a productivity tool. Has your district, or have other districts that you've worked with, started to really enhance their productivity through AI? For instance, using some of the Gemini features to write things, to change Google Sheets, to update existing things. There's an entire world of AI out there which is helping to make life easier. I have not seen a lot of school districts adopting those strategies and techniques. Did your team tackle any of that? Are there any recommendations of how we can use AI, maybe to write 504s or to, all of those wonderful things? Where do you think we stand in education these days when it comes to using AI for, task management, productivity, etc.?
So it kind of depends on the platform you're looking at. You mentioned Gemini, right? Mm-hmm. In our district, since I think they said needs to be, like a lot of these tools, you have to be over the age of 18. ChatGPT, for example, you can be as young as 13 with parent permission. But when it comes to that kind of stuff, the things that they're baking in, our district has actually kind of blocked a lot of those features.
For the adults?
For the adults as well. Yeah. So there was...
You're in Google Docs, you can't use Gemini to change or update a paragraph, is what you're saying.
Correct. At least it's not integrated right now with those. Now, what you can do is they don't necessarily say you can't use Gemini for your work, right? But they're just not making it accessible within your district login that's integrated into your tools.
Got it.
That seems to be, I think that's where districts are moving the slowest, because a lot of those features are also considered experimental features, right? Like Notebook LM with Google,
right?
That's considered one of their experimental features. So I had actually put in a help desk ticket in our district requesting, hey, could we get access to this? I think this would be great for teachers. And the response I got was, well, it's experimental. That means it could disappear. There's a lot of unknowns with it. So until it becomes more part of that Google Workspace for Education foundation, then we're not giving access to it just yet. And I think that's what they do with a lot of those tools. Now, in terms of being productive with it, we're still given that flexibility to use the tools that we have access to, but they're being a little bit more restrictive with our district logins with some of those productivity tools.
As a coach, let's take the school district out of this for a second. I'm going to put you on the hot seat here. How have you tried using AI in your coaching role? You're not logged into your school. You're working with your mentor teachers or your mentee teachers. Are you finding certain things helpful as a coach? Are you finding it easier? Do you recommend using some AI tools to your new teachers? Again, maybe your district's not using it, but these things are out here. Here's how you quickly make a lesson plan. Here's how you quickly make a rubric. Have you worked with your new teachers and just given them a tour of Magic AI and some of the features? Where do you lie on the professional side, or on the professional coaching side?
Yeah, I absolutely walk them through a lot of those tools. I have a lot of my early career teachers fill out a pre-meeting form. So before we meet, it just kind of covers, hey, what's on your mind? What are the things you want to cover? And a lot of times they list, give me more tools. Like the ones we've been looking at are awesome. Like I've been using those, but I want to see what else is out there. And so I have walked them through a lot of those tools for varying purposes, right? So I've showed them things like Magic School. I've showed them things like School AI and Brisk and those types of things. And their districts operate, at least from what I've gathered working with them, their districts operate similar to ours, which is as long as it's not directly in the hands of students, it's pretty much fair game, as long as we have access to it. And so I walk them through those tools just to show them what's out there to help them with the lesson planning. Dan Fitzpatrick, who's known as the AI educator out of the UK, he had a great series of videos a while back on how to sort of app smash these different AI tools to create these interactive virtual worlds to support a text that you're reading. Right. So I made one for The Outsiders where I had an AI generated image of Ponyboy. I had ChatGPT come up with a 500-word introduction of who he was and introducing his family. And then I put it into another tool that took the script, added a voice, and made that picture look like it was talking. And then we embedded that in ThingLink. And it was kind of like this virtual tour of Ponyboy's fictional neighborhood, kind of meeting the different characters. So I would show that to the teachers I work with, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is great to get them engaged, like to give them a visualization of what we're reading. And so I had one teacher in particular who was starting to experiment with that, with trying to create an interactive game almost with Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. And so, just showing them those tools that are out there. And some of the times it was, hey, it's as simple as creating a rubric. And this is super helpful because otherwise this would have taken me a ton of time. All the way into, well, here's what I was planning on doing. But now that I see these tools, I just came up with this idea to make it so much more engaging and interactive. And so I love walking them through those different tools when you see those light bulb moments go off in real time and see them excited about incorporating a new thing or getting a new idea for an upcoming lesson. So I'm fully on board with exploring and seeing how it can help you and enhance your instruction.
Matt, with ISTE coming up in just a few weeks, I think one thing is certain. The AI sessions are going to be packed. There's so many things out there from, tool-based to policy-based to, just basic philosophy of both at the teacher, the coaches, the administrator, the legal level, all of those different things. I'm curious what you think we're going to be talking about come the beginning of school year. It's not going away. It's going to get bigger. You don't know what's around the corner with this, but as you start to prepare for that next, Matt, I'm sorry, I know it's June, right? But we're going to talk about next year for a second here.
Yeah.
Are you preparing yourself any different? Or do you think you're going to be preparing yourself any different using some of these AI tools?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think where I see the conversations heading is we're already starting to see the shift away from the should we allow it or should we not allow it, right? It seems to be more and more districts and more states are saying we can't ignore it. So now we're kind of in that space where it's, okay, we're going to allow it, but what do we allow and what are the parameters on that? And so I think if you're in a district that's not already talking about that stuff, that's going to be the big topic of conversation next year as these summer workshops and professional developments from all these different organizations are going on. You're going to have more and more administrators and teachers thinking about, okay, now how do we make this fit into our district? Eventually, the ideal would be as districts are getting comfortable with their guidelines and policies, that it shifts away from the tools themselves and more starts getting into how do we redesign assessment? How are we rethinking our approach to teaching and learning with the technology at the place it's at, right? Because where I think you're going to see another jump, it's rumored that ChatGPT 5 is supposed to be coming out this summer. They just released GPT 4.0 this week. And over the summer, GPT-5 is supposed to be like this next big leap in it. And so when you start to see the advancement in the technology, what you can use it for, those conversations start to shift. Instead of what tools do we use, what tools don't we use, it's going to turn into how do we use this to rethink what we're currently doing in terms of assessment, in terms of personalized learning, differentiation, those types of things.
You know, we've been doing these AI shows since the beginning of January, and every time I do a new show, it seems like I'm starting at the beginning. And there's so much stuff that's out there, and there's so many right answers to go for in so many different directions. One of the questions that has to be on everybody's mind is, where do I go to find out more? We're going to make sure, and I'm going to ask Matt here to help me out by creating a list of all of those links that we've discussed and maybe give some of his recommendations. We're going to make sure that we have this on our show notes. Again, this is Ask the Tech Coach podcast, episode number 264. You can head on over to askthetechcoach.com to check out all of that stuff in our archives. But Matt, where can we go to find out that definitive place? I know this is like a hard question, but one location. Is it so-and-so's blog and website? Is it a government site? Is it AI.something? Where is the educational AI handbook, in your opinion, that we can bookmark and turn to?
I think one of the best places to start is AI for Education. Amanda Bickerstaff is the CEO of that organization. They do so much. She is very, very active on LinkedIn and is constantly posting updates on what new surveys are saying and conversations with some tech leaders. But then they also have a full library of professional development that range all kinds of topics, from just like what you said, where do I get started with this, all the way up to how do I rethink assessment. And so it's a website that has those videos. They have an intro to generative AI, like a little mini course that you can take that is very, it's a great starting point in terms, they focus more on those ChatGPT large language models, but it gives you a lot of those concepts. And in terms of ongoing information, they're constantly putting stuff out that I find extremely helpful for people on all ranges of the spectrum of experience with this stuff. In terms of something that might be more familiar as a good starting point, Google just released their generative AI course for educators that covers a lot of those basic crash course concepts. It's kind of like generative AI 101 for education. So those would be, if you're just getting started, that's where I would head first. And then as you get into it, that's when you're going to start to build those pool of resources. The amount of newsletters I am signed up to that my inbox is flooded with is a little outrageous, but it's very informative.
There certainly are many things, and everything that Matt just said, I've been sitting here busy putting it down in our show notes. Again, episode number 264. Matt, where do we go to find out more information about the great work that you're doing? What are your socials?
So in terms of socials, LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me. Facebook, I'm definitely one of those lurkers. If you see anything from me, it's because my wife posted and tagged me in it. But in terms of LinkedIn, that's a go-to spot for me. And then, just reaching out through email if anybody has questions in those regards, some specific things we talked about. I've benefited from so many different guests on podcasts that I've reached out to and have gotten some resources. So I'm more than happy to help people out through that avenue as well.
Again, we're going to make sure we have all the links over at episode 264. Matt, thank you so much. Please come back on the show. Perhaps we can have you back on sometime over the summertime to start talking about back to school AI. I feel like we could do another 48 minutes of this and do a completely brand new show, basically asking the same questions of each other with everything. There's so much stuff going on. Matt, Sherrill, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
If you guys have any questions, I urge you guys, reach out to us, reach out to other AI experts. As Matt said, sign up for newsletters. There's newsletters on all these different, amazing bloggers that are out there. Plus, you can go to LinkedIn, find a number of companies that are doing LinkedIn newsletters. There is so much information out there the number one thing that you should be thinking about is how to move forward, forming that team, starting those conversations, trying something out, figuring out what is that first toe that you put in the water. The time is now clearly to be having these conversations. And if you're not in those conversations, how do you get into those conversations? Look, coaches, there's so much stuff that's going on in your school district that involves you and needs to involve you. Try to figure out this summer how you can do that. And if you need any help, please feel free to reach out over at teachercast.net/contact. We would love to talk to you and have you guys be a part of our professional learning network. And that wraps up this episode of Ask the Tech Coach, episode number 264. Looking forward to seeing you guys in a few weeks at ISTE. Of course, we're going to be running a few different sessions. On Monday, we are going to be packed with our Ignite session in our coaches playground. And there's so much more great stuff that's happening. I hope to see you guys in Denver this year. And on behalf of Matt and everybody here in the TeacherCast Educational Network, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you guys to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.
You've been listening to Ask the Tech Coach, hosted by Jeff Bradbury of the TeacherCast Educational Network. Please reach out to the show with all of your questions on Twitter at AskTheTechCoach or online at www.askthetechcoach.com. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And please take a moment to write a review in the App Store.